Hello and welcome to the drama prologue in a dozen slides PowerPoint for Ms. Montgomery's English 112. This will take us into our fourth major unit in the class, which will also set us up for the final exam. I had a bit of fun putting together this PowerPoint, so you will see a lot of theatrical imagery and a lot of rhyming dialogue, academic style. A couple of brief academic definitions for us to begin. You see from these characteristics that drama is the most social of the literary genres we are studying. Poetry, of course, had to be originally read, sung, performed for an audience. But today it is largely read just like a novel, just like a short story. But as you see from the stage image here, drama has always been social. There's interaction on the stage. There's interaction in the audience. And then there is that interaction between human beings, between the audience and the performers. You'll recognize this Freytag's pyramid diagram by now. We used it to look at short fiction. So you should remember the terminology here. I want you to now look through it and map the general architecture of a play. Think of Act 1 in exposition and rising action, Act 2 in the turning point, and Act 3 with the falling action in resolution. Or more traditionally, break out each phase into Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, Act 5. If you look back at the structure of The Shining with the different parts of the novel, it is very much structured like a 5-act tragedy, and that was deliberate on King's part. Famously, the to be or not to be scene is in Act 3 of Hamlet, and rather important events surrounding a handkerchief will take place in Act 3 of Othello. And we're going to look at just a very brief history of drama, a very brief timeline, so you have some sense of where the works we are reading fit in. In ancient Greece, you see the little cartoon version of an amphitheater with the now famous tragedy and comedy masks there. Tragedy and comedy, as we know them today, are ancient Greek inventions. And amphitheaters, too, are still with us as public gathering and performing spaces. If you think of the amphitheaters on the campuses of the University of Virginia and the University of Richmond, to name just two here in the state of Virginia. In ancient Rome, what my Latin professor always told us was that to be a cultured, educated Roman, you had to know your Greek, but you had to be so convinced that the Roman was better. So we see tragedy and comedy continue and change, but drama is of less social importance. Ancient Rome also invents the closet drama, which is sort of a play script that you read for fun in your closet or small room. With the fall of Rome and into the early medieval era of the Dark Ages, you see the virtual disappearance of public theater across Europe in an era when there is death and disease and unsettling of the population. There just isn't the time and the impetus to gather socially and perform drama. But in the medieval era, we do see performed theater come back. There are portions of Christian church services enacted through skits. Corpus Christi plays. Corpus Christi is the body of Christ. It's the Christ story. Mystery cycles is the religious sense of the term mystery. They are essentially the greatest hits of the Bible. You would, on a town feast day, have one guild perform the creation, one guild perform the fall of man, one guild perform the flood, and so on. And the York Mystery Cycle, probably the most famous one, is still performed today in the town of York, and they do most of it in modern English, but each year they pick one play to do in Middle English, the original medieval pronunciation, and you can find clips of that online, that tradition continuing today. The language of drama moves from Latin to English, and the miracle and morality plays rise in this era. They are exactly what they sound like, religious visions of miracles or of morality struggles. The most famous morality play is called Everyman, and in it a character named Everyman has to contend with characters with names like virtue and vice and wisdom and good conduct to figure out his position between man and God. Renaissance drama, think of the literal meaning of the word renaissance, rebirth, is that rebirth of classical culture across Europe. So tragedy and comedy come back, and they become more secular. And really, tragedy and comedy, as we know them today throughout the Western world, are invented by Shakespeare and his contemporaries in this period. If you've ever heard the kind of thumbnail phrase that tragedy ends with death and destruction and a comedy ends with marriage and birth, you see that essential difference. And since then, we have really been living in that same dramatic world. We have really been continuing to vary those major classical and Renaissance forms. So for academic reading, you will read drama like fiction. You'll pay attention to how the playwright manipulates the plot structure. You'll pay attention to what the setting is and how it is conveyed. You'll pay attention to whose point of view we seem to be getting, and all of those other kind of fictional prose elements. And then you'll also read drama like poetry. Nowadays, scripts are just prose. If you've read the first play, Trifles, you're thinking it's just prose. But from the early days and up until about the 18th century, play dialogue was more often than not in some kind of structured, metered verse. Shakespeare, for example, most famously uses that unrhymed iambic pentameter blank verse to structure his dialogue. And when he deviates from that, he'll do that for a reason. You'll see him maybe using simple rhyming couplets to make fun of a character or show that the character is lying. Or you will see a character breaking from iambic pentameter into completely unmetered, unrhythmic speech in order to demonstrate an emotional breakdown or anger or something similar. If anybody saw As You Like It at the American Shakespeare Center a couple of years ago, there was a great scene where the one character is leaving these love poems around throughout, and they start out as these ridiculous rhyming couplets, very simple, very sing-songy. And then later in the poem, when his later in the play, excuse me, when his verses become more sophisticated, he's doing them in blank verse, and the actor was over-pronouncing the accents on the syllables in blank verse, and it was just hilarious. It was beautifully done. And you'll look for figurative language. You'll look for all the kinds of things you looked at in that second essay. And then last but not least, you read drama, as a performance. Casting considerations. Think of the kinds of discussions we've had about The Shining, where what's the difference between Shelley Duvall's Wendy and Rebecca De Mornay's Wendy? What's the effect of seeing Jack Nicholson as Jack versus Steven Weber as Jack? What's the effect of Kubrick's setting versus the use of the Stanley Hotel? What color schemes are being used? What lighting is being used? A good contemporary example of color scheme and lighting is the Harry Potter series of films. If you look at the early films that were more lighthearted and were really children's films, you have a lot of sunlight and very bright colors. And then as the subject matter becomes more serious and more sad, the subsequent films get grayer and grayer, and the light gets dimmer and dimmer. And I'm sure you can think of many examples in films you've seen where a prop is vital, where a piece of clothing is vital, a favorite color, a statue that's in the background of a scene gives you a symbol of something relating to a character. Be open to those things when you see drama. And there you have the works cited for the references in this presentation. And then some external links to just some more detailed timelines. Some of these have interactive elements. Gave you the website to Shakespeare's Globe there. You can also like them on Facebook, and I have both Shakespeare's Globe and the American Shakespeare Center on my Facebook feed, and sometimes I get all excited about something and think I'm going to go to Stanton, and then I realize the thing I'm reading about is actually on the other side of the ocean. But I encourage you to explore other resources, and also to take advantage of local opportunities, like the productions that come to Blue Ridge, like, of course, the American Shakespeare Center in Stanton. as well as other college and community theaters you may have the opportunity to attend. And now that we've had this groundwork, we will move into looking at the plays themselves. So keep this theoretical framework in mind as you really read theater as theater.